Some places don't feel like destinations. They feel like exhaling. Tonight, we drift toward a wide, water-laced world in southern Louisiana, where the land and the river have been talking to each other for a very long time. The Atchafalaya Swamp does not hurry to explain itself. It simply exists, softly. Dark water, pale mist, cypress trunks rising like patient pillars, and long strands of Spanish moss that sway the way a slow thought sways when it is almost ready to become a dream. Here, even the sounds feel rounded at the edges, a distant frog call that arrives like a gentle knock, the faint shuffle of reeds, a quiet splash that doesn't insist on being noticed. The swamp is not asking you to stay alert. It is inviting you to settle into the kind of calm that comes when nature is allowed to be exactly what it is. Welcome to sleepy nature sleep, where the wild grows soft and curiosity becomes calm. Tonight, let your thoughts follow the rhythm of the earth, your breathing settle like evening wind, and your mind wander gently through the quiet wild. If your day has been busy, you don't need to carry it any farther than this moment. Let it sit down beside you like a bag you've been holding for too long. Let your shoulders loosen, let your jaw soften. If it helps, imagine the air around you cooling into a comfortable night, deep blues and muted greens like moonlight filtered through leaves. As you listen, you're part of a small, quiet community of people who enjoy letting nature's slower stories guide them toward rest. If you'd like, you can share where you're listening from. Just a simple hello, like a firefly's blink in the dark. And if these gentle journeys help you sleep, you might consider returning for another night, another landscape, another calm curiosity, waiting like a lantern in the distance. If you'd like to support the channel in a small way, a simple like, subscribe, or kind comment helps these sleepy nature stories find the people who need them. No rush, no pressure, just a quiet thank you, floating on the same calm current as everything else here. Now, let's begin our slow tour. Tonight, we'll drift through the Atchafalaya, America's largest swamp, where the Mississippi River's old pathways still breathe under moonlight. We won't chase anything. We won't search for drama. We'll simply notice the soft details, the way water carries reflections, the way trees hold stillness, the way night creatures live their gentle routines. And as the swamp settles into itself, you can settle too. In the Atchafalaya, the question arrives the way fog arrives, quietly, without footsteps. What does a landscape remember? Not in the human way, with names and dates and neatly folded stories, but in the way water returns to familiar bends, in the way cypress trunks keep standing where they have always stood, holding their patience like a long-held breath, in the way birds come back to the same hush of shoreline, and frogs return to the same dependable notes at night, as if the air itself has a memory for music. You can ask the question softly, as though speaking to the surface of the water. And the swamp doesn't answer in words. It answers in patterns. It remembers through flow, through slow rearranging, through sediments settling, grain by grain, into new ground. It remembers through the gentle persistence of living things that have learned how to be comfortable here, how to rest, how to wait, how to move without fuss. And tonight, you don't need to solve the question. You only need to let it float beside you, like a small leaf on dark water. A question can be a kind companion when it isn't demanding a conclusion. It can be a soft doorway that opens into wonder. If you're listening in bed, allow your body to be heavy. Let the mattress hold you like a warm shoreline. If you're listening while resting somewhere else, let your shoulders drop and your hands loosen. The Atchafalaya is a place that respects unhurried bodies. It does not require alertness. It seems to prefer that you arrive with softened attention, like someone stepping into a quiet room and instinctively lowering their voice. So we'll travel slowly. We'll let the swamp show us its memory in small, ordinary details. A ripple that widens and fades, moss that sways as if the tree is dreaming, an animal that chooses stillness because stillness is efficient, and also because stillness is calm. And perhaps, as we drift through these moments, we'll notice something gentle about ourselves, that our own minds remember in patterns too. Worries returning to the same corners, thoughts looping like little currents. The same story replaying, only to soften when we stop pushing it. Tonight, we won't push. We'll simply ask the question once more, like a whisper under the leaves. What does a landscape remember? Then we'll allow the Atchafalaya to answer the way it always does, slowly, quietly, in the language of water and time. Before we step further in, it helps to feel the shape of this place, not as a map, but as an atmosphere. The Atchafalaya Basin spreads across southern Louisiana like a wide, breathing quilt of water and land. It is not one single swampy puddle, as some sleepy imaginations might joke. It is a whole world of bayous, backwaters, channels, flooded forests, and hidden pockets of stillness where reflections settle and stay. If you could hover gently above it, like a heron with no schedule, you would see a mosaic. Dark ribbons of water, lighter patches of floating plants, and the steady vertical lines of cypress and tupelo rising from the floodplain. In daylight, the greens can be bright and lush. At night, everything shifts into softer tones, deep blues, charcoal shadows, and silvery highlights that move across the surface like slow, quiet handwriting. This basin exists because water likes options. The Mississippi River has long carried more water and sediment than any single channel can keep neatly contained. Over time, the Atchafalaya became one of the river's natural paths toward the Gulf. And the result is this wide, living wetland, an in-between place where land and water are always negotiating, always adjusting, always doing it calmly. In the Atchafalaya, the ground is not always firm. Some places are solid enough to hold roots and trees. Other places are mud that shifts underfoot. Some places are simply water, dark and reflective, where you can't quite tell what is surface and what is depth until a fish makes a small suggestion with its tail. And because this is a wet world, life here has a certain softness built into it. Leaves are often glossy, air is often humid. Sound travels with a gentle blur, as if the swamp has its own natural muffling system. Even movement feels slower here, not because anything is forced to slow down, but because the environment seems to encourage it. Tonight, we'll move through this landscape with the easiest pace. We'll notice the trees first, because they are the calm architecture of the swamp. We'll notice the water next, because it is the swamp's heartbeat. Then we'll notice the small lives that fill the spaces between: birds and insects, frogs and fish, turtles and alligators, each one participating in the quiet economy of the basin. And as we begin, you might let your mind do something similar. Become a landscape, spread out, make room for stillness. Let thoughts be like distant shorelines, present but not demanding. The Atchafalaya does not rush to introduce itself. It simply opens its calm, watery arms and waits for you to relax into the view. In most places, water is asked to behave, to stay in its lane, to flow where it is told, to move quickly, efficiently, like it has appointments to keep. But the Atchafalaya is not a place of strict instructions. Here, water is allowed to wander. It splits into side channels and slips between tree trunks. It gathers in still pockets where reflections become smooth enough to hold the moon. It drifts around fallen branches without complaint. And when it rejoins itself, two currents meeting again, it does so quietly, like old friends passing in a hallway with a small nod. The wandering is not random. It is simply natural. Water follows the shape of the land, and the land in a swamp is always being gently rewritten. Silt settles, channels shift, floods rise and recede. The Atchafalaya becomes, over time, a soft lesson in flexibility. If you listen closely, you can hear the water moving, not loudly, not dramatically, more like the sound of fabric sliding slowly, or the hush of a page being turned. In some places, it makes a faint lap against roots. In other places, it runs under floating plants and seems to forget it is moving at all. And this wandering water carries things. It carries tiny pieces of soil, sediment, so fine it looks like chocolate in moonlight. It carries seeds that will someday become plants if they find a comfortable place to rest. It carries fallen leaves that swirl in small eddies, spinning like sleepy dancers who have no audience and don't mind. Sometimes, if you imagine the water's thoughts, just for a moment, gently, you might picture it saying, "There is no hurry. There is only the next curve." The Atchafalaya's water is also a kind of caretaker. It keeps the forest roots moist. It shapes habitats. It cools and warms at its own pace, creating pockets of comfort for fish and amphibians. It brings nutrients, and it takes away what is no longer needed, like a quiet housekeeping routine that happens while everyone else is resting. And there is something soothing about watching water do its work without fuss. It doesn't argue, it doesn't strain, it simply continues. If your mind feels busy tonight, you might borrow that style. Let thoughts flow without wrestling them into order. Let them drift. Let them split into smaller streams and then fade back into one calm current. You don't need to hold on to any particular idea. You can let it float past like a leaf, like a small piece of driftwood, like a soft ripple that widens and disappears. In the Atchafalaya, wandering is not a mistake. It is how the whole system breathes. And as the water keeps wandering, patient, gentle, quiet, you can begin to do the same, drifting toward rest. In a swamp, trees learn a particular kind of calm. They do not insist on dry feet. They do not complain about damp air. They simply adjust, and then they stand, steady and unbothered, like the slowest guardians of the basin. The bald cypress, is one of the great presences of the Atchafalaya. Its trunk rises from water that may be shallow or deep depending on the season, and it rises without drama. The bark can look textured and wise, like a story written in quiet ridges, and the base of the tree often swells outward, broad and stable, as if it is hugging the earth underneath the water. Nearby, tupelo trees join the scene, adding their own graceful lines. Together, these trees make the swamp feel like a cathedral built for softness. Pillars of wood, ceilings of leaves, aisles of dark water that reflect everything above. When you look at them in moonlight, the cypress can seem almost sculptural, not sharp or intimidating, just solid, slow, and deeply at home. Some cypress in southern wetlands live for centuries. That kind of time changes the feeling of a place. It's difficult to be frantic when you're in the company of something that has been calmly watching seasons come and go for so long. And the trees participate in the swamp's quiet economy. Their roots hold soil in place. Their shade cools the water. Their fallen leaves become food for tiny organisms, which become food for other creatures, and so on. Life looping gently through the system like a lullaby that repeats its best part. Sometimes, a breeze moves through the canopy, and the leaves whisper with a soft, papery sound. Not the loud rustle of a dry forest, but a gentle, humid murmur, like someone speaking from another room, quietly enough that you don't need to respond. If you've ever needed permission to be still, trees offer it freely. They don't measure productivity. They don't count tasks. They simply exist, and their existence is useful because it creates structure for everything else. Tonight, you might imagine a cypress tree as a model for rest. Not rigid, not tense, just stable. Wide at the base, rooted in something deeper than the surface concerns of the day. You can let your own attention become like that, broad, steady, unhurried. If you notice a thought tugging at you, you don't need to chase it. You can let it pass through your mind the way a breeze passes through branches. You can remain standing, inwardly, in a quiet way. Cypress trees do not rush toward tomorrow. They are already there, in their own slow sense of time, patient as night, comfortable in darkness, calm in moonlight. And as we linger with them, the Atchafalaya begins to feel less like a place you are visiting, and more like a slow rhythm you are joining. If you drift close to a cypress in the Atchafalaya, you may notice something curious rising from the water. Little wooden humps, knobs, small towers, shapes that look like they belong in a quiet sculpture garden where the artist only works in slow motion. These are called cypress knees. The name sounds slightly humorous, and it's allowed to. Nature, even in its most ancient moods, sometimes offers a detail that feels like a gentle wink. Knees in a swamp, standing calmly in water, as if the trees decided to bend down and rest their elbows somewhere. Cypress knees are part of the cypress root system, rising above the water and mud. Scientists have offered different ideas about what they do. Some suggest they may help with stability in wet, shifting ground. Some wonder if they play a role in gas exchange for roots in low oxygen soils. And some simply acknowledge what the swamp teaches us again and again. A living thing can have more than one purpose, and it doesn't have to explain itself to be meaningful. Tonight, we don't need a final answer. Instead, we can enjoy the quiet presence of the knees themselves. They break up the surface of the water and make the flooded forest feel textured, like a soft, uneven shoreline even where there is no shore. They create little obstacles for drifting leaves, tiny eddies for water to curl around. Sometimes they collect a thin line of algae or a small pile of debris, like the swamp has absent-mindedly decorated them. In moonlight, cypress knees cast faint shadows. In fog, they appear and disappear as the mist moves, like slow punctuation marks in a sentence written by the river. And if you're listening while your mind begins to soften, you might find the knees soothing simply because they are there, quietly repeating, quietly rising, quietly existing in a way that suggests the swamp has layers you'll never fully catalog. That can be comforting. Not everything needs to be fully understood to be safe. Not everything needs to be named to be gentle. Sometimes the most restful feeling comes from allowing mystery to remain unforced, like a closed book on a bedside table that you don't have to open tonight. If you want, let your thoughts become like water moving around cypress knees. Instead of colliding with a worry, your mind can flow around it. Instead of getting caught on a detail, you can let it be a shape you pass by quietly. The Atchafalaya is full of these small invitations to soften. Cypress knees are one of them, quiet forms rising from quiet water, reminding you that nature is both practical and poetic, and it never hurries to justify itself. And as we continue, we'll let the mystery stay, gentle, present, calm, and wonderfully untroubled. There's a kind of softness in the Atchafalaya that comes from above, not from the sky exactly, but from the branches, where Spanish moss hangs in long, delicate strands, draping trees as if the swamp has decided to decorate itself for a slow evening. Spanish moss is not actually a moss. It's an epiphytic plant, which means it often lives on other plants without taking nutrients from them. It uses the air and rain and the little bits of moisture that drift through the swamp. In a place where humidity is generous, Spanish moss can thrive, and it thrives with a particular flair for the dramatic, only the drama is quiet. The strands sway when the air moves, not sharply, not suddenly, just a slow rocking, like the world is gently nodding off. In moonlight, the moss can look silvery. In shadow, it becomes a soft gray-green, blending into the night palette that makes everything feel calmer. And there's something about moss-draped trees that changes the mood of a landscape. It makes the forest feel older, even when it's simply being itself. It makes the space feel hushed, like curtains drawn in a room where someone is sleeping. Spanish moss also creates small worlds. Tiny insects live among the strands. Birds sometimes use it as nesting material, weaving softness into their homes. It can catch dew and hold moisture, creating a little reservoir of comfort in the air. Even the act of hanging, of being suspended, feels like a lesson in ease. The moss doesn't grip the branch with urgency. It simply rests there, lightly, letting gravity do most of the work. If you've been holding your thoughts too tightly today, the moss offers a different strategy. Hang loosely. Let things be supported without strain. Imagine your worries as if they were tangled in Spanish moss, still present, but softened, slowed, filtered through something gentle. Imagine the day's sharp edges being brushed by these strands until they feel less pointed, more rounded. And if your mind tries to create stories in the dark, because minds like to do that, you can guide those stories towards softness. In the Atchafalaya, the moss is not a sign of something spooky. It is simply a plant enjoying the moisture in the air. It is nature's way of adding texture to the quiet. Tonight, let Spanish moss become a visual lullaby. Long strands swaying, branches disappearing behind soft curtains, moonlight caught in 1,000 fine threads. And as you picture it, you might notice your breathing becoming slower, more even, as if your lungs are learning from the moss how to move with the air rather than against it. In this swamp, even decoration is functional. Even softness has purpose. Even the trees seem dressed for rest. And with that gentle curtain drawn across the scene, we continue deeper into the night, quietly, comfortably, and without hurry. The Atchafalaya has a kind of weather that doesn't announce itself with loud changes. Instead, it settles. Humidity rests in the air like a warm shawl. Mist forms near the water's surface and drifts along the channels as if it has nowhere urgent to be. Dew gathers on leaves and moss strands in small beads, each one reflecting a tiny piece of moonlight. In wetlands, air and water are close companions. They exchange moisture and temperature in gentle ways, and the result is an atmosphere that can feel thick, soft, and slightly dreamy. Like the whole place has been lightly steamed, the way a bathroom mirror fogs after a warm shower. Fog is especially interesting here because it feels like nature's dimmer switch. When fog slides into a cypress forest, distance becomes less specific. Trees farther away turn into silhouettes. Lights, moonlight, starlight, spread and blur. The world becomes simpler, and the mind often appreciates simplicity at night. You might notice that the swamp's weather doesn't push you toward alertness. There is no sharp wind demanding attention, no crisp air that feels like a slap. Instead, the air seems to say, stay, rest, soften. And if you listen closely, really closely, you can sense the quiet movement of mist. It creeps over water. It curls around knees and roots. It gathers in shallow dips and then slowly thins, like a thought dissolving before it becomes a worry. There is also comfort in knowing that this weather is ordinary for the swamp. Humidity is not a problem here. It is a feature. It supports plants. It supports insects. It makes the whole ecosystem feel lush and alive, even at night when most things are quiet. Tonight, you might borrow that wetland logic for your own rest. If your mind is humid, full of feelings, full of lingering thoughts, you don't need to dry it out with effort. You can simply let it be. You can allow yourself to be a little foggy, a little dreamy. That is not failure. That is the beginning of sleep. Imagine the air around you becoming softer. Imagine the edges of your room blurring slightly, not in a disorienting way, but in a comforting way, like dimming a lamp. Let the Atchafalaya's mist be a metaphor for turning down the intensity of the day. And if you find yourself smiling at the idea of a swamp having weather that likes naps, you're not alone. Some places feel like they were designed to make you yawn, even though nature designs nothing for our schedules. The Atchafalaya simply does what it does, and the side effect is serenity. Mist drifts, humidity lingers, air becomes quiet. And within that quiet air, we begin to hear something else, the soundscape that lives beneath it. soft and layered, like nighttime breathing turned into music. The Atchafalaya at night is not silent. It is gentle. The soundscape is built from small voices, frogs and insects, distant birds, the faintest movement of water against wood. None of it feels urgent. It feels like a steady background that says, everything is continuing, calmly. In the distance, you might hear a frog call that repeats with patient consistency. Somewhere else, another frog answers, not as a debate, but as a soft acknowledgement. Insects add their own shimmering tones, crickets that pulse like tiny metronomes, katydids that sound like quiet, rhythmic ticking. These sounds layer on top of one another until the whole scene feels woven. A living fabric of night noise stitched together by creatures who are simply doing what they do. And because the swamp air is humid, the sounds can feel slightly softened, as though the atmosphere itself is cushioning them. They travel across water and through trees with a gentle blur, the way a lullaby sounds when it comes from another room. If you're trying to fall asleep, this kind of soundscape can be a small miracle. Your mind doesn't have to invent noise. Nature provides it, steady, repetitive, reassuring. It tells you that you are not alone in the dark. It tells you that the night is not empty. It is inhabited by small lives moving carefully through their routines. Sometimes you may hear a soft splash and then nothing. No follow-up, no explanation, just a brief punctuation mark in the story of the water. In a swamp, even a splash can feel polite. And if your mind tends to turn sounds into narratives because it enjoys doing that, you can guide those narratives toward calm. That splash might be a fish turning slowly. That rustle might be reed shifting. That distant call might be a bird settling on a branch. No chase, no alarm, just gentle movement. You might also notice how your own body responds to repetitive sounds. Breathing can slow, muscles can unclench, thoughts can stop sprinting and begin strolling. In a sense, your nervous system starts to synchronize with the swamp's tempo. If you want a small, soothing exercise, you can let the soundscape become a kind of counting that doesn't require effort. On one breath in, you notice a frog call. On one breath out, you notice the steady insect chorus. Then you let both fade into the background again. The Atchafalaya doesn't demand that you focus. It only offers options for your attention to rest on, softly, briefly, and then release. And as the soundscape continues, layered, gentle, dependable, we drift toward the creatures who embody this swampy calm, perhaps better than anyone. The ones who can look like floating logs and mean it sincerely. In the Atchafalaya, you may eventually notice a shape in the water that is so still it almost feels like part of the scenery. A long, dark form, a subtle ridge, a pair of eyes that sit just above the surface like two small, quiet lanterns. An alligator. It can be tempting, in many stories, to make alligators into something dramatic. Tonight, we will not. Tonight, we will let them be what they often are in warm wetlands, calm, conserving energy, and quietly present. Alligators are reptiles, which means their bodies do not generate heat the way mammals do. They rely on their environment. Warm water, warm air, sunny banks. These help them regulate temperature. And because energy matters, they often choose stillness when stillness is sufficient. So in the swamp at night, An alligator may simply float, not with effort, but with ease. Their bodies are well suited to water life, eyes and nostrils positioned so they can breathe and see, while most of their form remains submerged. The result is a kind of minimalism. Only what needs to be above the surface is above the surface. There is something oddly comforting about that design. It suggests a philosophy. Show only what is necessary. Keep the rest quiet. If you picture an alligator drifting, you might notice how calm it looks when it isn't doing anything in particular. It becomes part of the swamp's slow geometry, another line among roots and shadows. It is not rushing. It is not presenting. It is simply existing. And while we keep the tone gentle, we can still appreciate the quiet intelligence in this. Rest is not laziness in a wetland. Rest is strategy. Conserving energy allows a creature to move when it truly matters, and to remain still when it doesn't. You might borrow that. If you've been pushing yourself all day, moving constantly, thinking constantly, you can give yourself permission to float, to rest without justifying it, to be for a while like a dark shape on calm water, steady, supported, and unbothered by the need to prove anything. A small, gentle humor can live here too, because if you've ever tried to look busy while actually wanting a nap, the alligator has perfected the opposite, looking like a log while being a full, living creature. It's a talent, a quiet one. In the Atchafalaya, nothing scolds you for slowing down. Even its most famous residents are experts in stillness. And as the alligator continues to float, calm, silent, patient, we let our attention drift nearby toward another group of quiet characters who seem to have made slow and steady into a lifestyle. The turtles. If the Atchafalaya had a motto for relaxing, turtles would probably approve of it. Not by cheering loudly, just by blinking slowly and continuing to be turtles. In the swamp, turtles often appear as gentle shapes resting on logs or partially submerged branches. Sometimes you see a cluster of them, like small rounded stones that somehow decided to wear shells and take the afternoon off. Even when they are alert, their movements can feel measured, careful, efficient, unhurried. Turtles are deeply attuned to temperature. Like many reptiles, they use their environment to warm and cool themselves. That's why you might see them basking, resting in sun or in gentle warmth when it's available. And even in the evening, when the light is softer, their habit of choosing comfortable spots feels like a reminder. Comfort is not a luxury, it's a basic skill. When a turtle slides from a log into water, it can be almost comically discreet. No dramatic splash, just a smooth, quiet entry, like someone leaving a room without wanting to interrupt the conversation. And once in the water, turtles become calm drifters. They paddle gently, they rest, they move with the kind of steady patience that makes time feel wider. There's also something reassuring about the shell itself. A portable home, a built-in boundary, a physical reminder that you can carry protection with you and still move through the world calmly. The turtle doesn't need to build walls every day. It simply brings its shelter along and then focuses on the simple needs of living. Tonight, you might imagine your bed or your resting place as your shell, not in a lonely way, but in a safe way, a comfortable space that travels with you in the sense that you can return to it in your mind. You can tuck into it. You can let the outside world become less important for a while. The Atchafalaya supports many kinds of turtles, each with its own habits and preferences. But tonight we keep the facts gentle and the feelings soft. Turtles here are part of the swamp's calm rhythm. They are proof that an unhurried life can still be a full life. If your thoughts are busy, try the turtle method. Move slowly from one thought to the next. Or better yet, let the thought sink quietly into the water and disappear without needing to be solved. A turtle does not rush towards sleep. It simply continues its calm, steady way of being. And in the presence of that steadiness, your own nervous system can begin to settle, like water smoothing out after a soft, quiet ripple. Next, we'll lift our gaze slightly toward pale shapes in the shallows, birds that stand as still as moonlit statues, turning patience into art. In the Atchafalaya, some creatures seem designed to match moonlight. Egrets are like that, bright, clean silhouettes against dark water, as if the night decided to place a few living lanterns along the shoreline. When an egret stands in the shallows, it does not look rushed. It looks composed. Its body becomes a quiet shape of balance, long legs, slim neck, and a stillness that feels almost deliberate. In daytime, their white feathers can look crisp and brilliant. At night, that whiteness turns softer, like candlelight behind thin paper. The edges blur slightly in mist. A faint breeze may lift a feather and set it down again, so gently that even the movement feels like rest. Egrets often feed in shallow water, but tonight we do not follow the story with urgency. We simply notice the rhythm. Pause, wait, a careful step. Another pause. Their feet move slowly, as if they are testing the water's mood. Their gaze stays calm, scanning without tension. It can be soothing to watch a creature that doesn't seem to multitask. The egret is not checking a calendar. It is not thinking about what comes next. It is here, in this exact pocket of water, letting time be wide. If you've been carrying too many thoughts, you might borrow that quality. Imagine your attention becoming narrow in a peaceful way, like a beam of moonlight. Not sharp, not intense, just gently focused. One breath, one sound, one soft image, then another. Sometimes egrets gather near one another, each bird making its own small decisions about where to stand. There's no argument in the scene, just quiet spacing, like people choosing seats in a calm room. They do not need to be close to feel connected. They simply share the same night, and the swamp welcomes them with simple hospitality. Shallow water, small ripples, pockets of stillness that hold reflections. The egret, in return, becomes part of the landscape, another vertical line among cypress trunks, another pale highlight among dark blues and grays. If you like a small, gentle joke, you might imagine the egret as the swamp's careful curator of elegance, always dressed in white, always moving as if the floor might be freshly polished. Even the frogs seem to call a little softer when an egret is nearby, as if respecting the formal outfit. Tonight, let the egret's calm become contagious. Let your shoulders soften. Let your eyes feel heavy. Let your mind do less. And as the pale lantern birds keep their quiet vigil in the shallows, we drift our attention toward another swamp artist of stillness. Taller, more statuesque, and wonderfully unhurried. The heron. If you could bottle patience, it might look like a heron. In the Atchafalaya, herons stand in shallow water with an elegance that feels almost ancient. Their bodies are tall and slim, their necks folded in graceful curves, their legs planted like roots. They can remain motionless for long stretches, as if time has simply decided to rest on their shoulders. At night, a heron becomes a quiet silhouette. The details soften, feathers, colors, patterns, until what remains is shape and presence. A long beak points toward the water like a calm question mark. A gentle reflection mirrors the bird beneath it, slightly distorted by the slow breathing of the surface. The swamp is full of motion, but it is also full of pauses. Herons embody those pauses. They show how stillness can be active in its own way, not busy, not strained, simply attentive. And attentive is a comforting word tonight. Not hyper-aware, not on guard, just present. You might notice how a heron's movement, when it happens, tends to be minimal. One slow step, a careful shift of weight, a slight turn of the head. Each action looks economical, like the bird understands that unnecessary motion is extra work. The heron seems to conserve energy, not just for practicality, but because the swamp itself feels like a place that rewards calm choices. If your mind has been running on extra motion, extra thoughts, extra scenarios, extra what-ifs, you can let the heron's example gently interrupt that. Imagine that you too are allowed to do less, that you can stand quietly inside your own breathing, that you can let the day's loudest thoughts become distant, like sounds across water. Herons also feel like part of the swamp's architecture. Their bodies echo the vertical lines of cypress trunks. Their stillness matches the stillness of hanging moss. If the swamp is a cathedral, the heron is one of its quiet, living pillars, present, balanced, calm. And there's a subtle humor in how serious a heron can look. It often appears as if it is pondering something very important, like the philosophy of water or the proper distance between ripples. In truth, it may simply be standing, and that is enough. The heron gives us permission to look thoughtful, even when we're doing absolutely nothing. Tonight, allow yourself that permission. You don't have to solve anything to be worthy of rest. You don't have to figure it out before sleep arrives. You can be like a heron, quietly present, beautifully uncomplicated. In the background, the swamp continues its soft chorus. A frog calls, an insect answers, water shifts around a root, and somewhere above, the night holds another voice, rounded and gentle, traveling through branches like a slow wave. We follow that sound next, toward the barred owl's calm, familiar call. The Atchafalaya at night can feel like a room with many quiet conversations. One of the softest voices belongs to the barred owl. You may not see it at first. Owls can blend into branches and shadow with remarkable ease, but you can often hear the presence, an echoing call that rolls through the trees, less like a shout and more like a gentle announcement that the night is awake in its own calm way. The barred owl's call is famous for sounding a bit like a phrase, and humans, being humans, often enjoy turning it into a playful pattern of words. Tonight, you can smile at that without needing to repeat anything loudly. The important part is the feeling, a deep, rounded sound that travels well in humid air, moving from tree to tree like a slow drift of music. There is something comforting about hearing a night bird that sounds steady and familiar. It doesn't feel like an alarm. It feels like a presence, like a lighthouse that is also trying to be polite. Owls are built for low-light life. Large eyes, soft feathers that help their flight remain quiet, a gentle efficiency in how they move through darkness. But we do not turn this into a story of pursuit. Instead, we appreciate the design, nature shaping a creature to fit the night so well that the night seems to welcome it. If you imagine the barred owl perched in a cypress, you might picture its body relaxed, feathers slightly fluffed against the damp air. Perhaps it turns its head slowly, watching the world with calm curiosity. There's no hurry in the scene, only awareness. And awareness is different from worry. Worry feels tight. Awareness feels open. The owl's presence can remind you. You can notice things without gripping them. You can be aware of your day without reliving it. You can let memories pass through your mind like moonlight through moss. Soft, filtered, not demanding. In the Atchafalaya, the owl's call becomes part of the soundscape's layering. Frogs below, insects everywhere, water moving quietly, and above it all, the owl's voice, a low note that makes the whole scene feel deeper, like adding bass to a gentle song. If you're listening in bed, you might let that deep sound become a cue for relaxation. As if every time you imagine the owl calling, your body receives a message. It is night now. It is safe to rest. You can let your muscles loosen. And if your mind tries to stay busy, you can give it a simple task. Picture the owl's call moving through the trees like fog. Not fast, not sharp, just drifting. Soon the scene draws our attention downward again, to the small voices that fill the swamp with steady rhythm. The frogs begin to feel like the swamp's heartbeat, and we listen with the kind of softness that makes sleep easier. In the Atchafalaya, frogs do something wonderful for tired minds. They repeat themselves, not in an annoying way, in a soothing way. A frog call is one of nature's simplest patterns. A sound, a pause, the same sound again. When many frogs call together, those patterns overlap, creating a chorus that feels like woven fabric, layered, rhythmic, and strangely comforting. Different frog species make different sounds, and the swamp becomes a small orchestra. Some calls are low and rounded. Some are higher, like tiny bells. Some sound like soft clicking, as if the night is gently tapping on a wooden table. None of it needs to be interpreted. It simply exists, and your nervous system often relaxes because the sounds are steady and predictable. If you listen closely, you can also hear the spaces between the calls. Those pauses are just as calming as the sounds themselves. The swamp is not filling every moment with noise. It leaves room. It leaves breath. And your body likes room. Your breath naturally finds the rhythm. Your mind naturally settles into the repetition. Thoughts that were sharp begin to round at the edges, like stones smoothed by water. Frogs are deeply connected to wet places. Their lives often depend on moisture, on pools and shallow edges where sound can carry across water. In the Atchafalaya, they become part of the landscape's nighttime identity, like moss, like cypress, like mist. You don't have to search for them. They will often make themselves known, softly and steadily. There's also a gentle humor in how confident frogs sound in the dark. They can be quite loud for such small bodies, as if they are announcing themselves to the moon. You might imagine a tiny frog putting on its most serious night voice, fully committed to its role in the swamp choir. It's earnest, it's practical, and it's a little charming. Tonight, you can let the frogs do what they do, and let yourself do what you need, rest. If you want a simple sleep exercise, try this. On the inhale, imagine one frog call. On the exhale, imagine the pause afterward. Then again, sound, pause, sound, pause. The pattern becomes a gentle rocking chair for your attention. And as you listen, notice how your body responds. Shoulders drop, forehead smooths, the jaw softens, the belly relaxes. You don't need to force any of this. You simply let the swamp's rhythm guide you. The Atchafalaya is full of small lives that keep time for the night. Frogs are among the most dependable, and as their chorus continues, small points of light begin to appear above the water, quiet sparks that blink in and out, turning the swamp air into a slow, floating constellation. We drift toward them next, to the fireflies. Some nights in the Atchafalaya feel as if the sky has quietly borrowed the water, and the water has quietly borrowed the sky. Then, as if to complete the trade, the air borrows a few stars. Fireflies appear above the swamp in gentle flickers, blinking on and off with unhurried rhythm. They don't shine continuously. They pulse, brief light, then darkness, then light again. It's a pattern that feels naturally sleepy, like the night is practicing closing its eyes. Fireflies are not flies, and their glow is not magic, though it can feel like it. Their light comes from a chemical reaction in their bodies, bioluminescence, producing a cool, efficient glow. In nature, the purpose is communication, often linked to courtship. But tonight, we don't treat it like a busy story. We treat it like ambiance, like the swamp decorating itself with quiet punctuation. In the humid air, the flashes can seem softer, as if the light is diffused by moisture. The result is less like a spotlight and more like a tiny lantern behind frosted glass. The fireflies float over reeds, drift between tree trunks, hover above the water's reflection. Sometimes you see a flash mirrored on the surface, a small star duplicated, then gently distorted by a ripple. If your mind enjoys wonder, this is a comfortable kind. Small lights that appear and disappear, not demanding attention, just offering it. And there's a gentle humor in how fireflies can make even serious adults feel like quiet children again. One blink and a part of the mind says, "Oh, that's lovely." Another blink and the mind says, "Maybe everything is not so complicated tonight." You can let that simple delight become part of your rest. Imagine a firefly's glow as a cue to soften. Each blink is a reminder to unclench. Light, dark, light, dark. A slow rhythm, like breathing, like eyelids. If you've been staring at screens, if your day has been full of bright, constant light, the firefly's flicker is a kinder style of illumination. It doesn't insist, it doesn't flood the room. It simply appears briefly, then lets the darkness return. In the Atchafalaya, those small stars in the air blend with the frog's steady choir and the owl's distant voice. The swamp becomes a lullaby made of layers, sound, moisture, shadow, and tiny lights. And when the fireflies drift onward, another set of steady night workers continues the soundtrack. Crickets and katydids, the gentle clockwork of insects. We listen next to their repeating patterns, as if the swamp itself is keeping time for your sleep. If the Atchafalaya had a clock, it might not have hands. It might have crickets. Insects are among the most dependable makers of nighttime rhythm. Their sounds can be steady, repeating, and beautifully unconcerned with human schedules. They do not care if it is a weekday. They do not care if you have an early morning. They simply sing because the night is the time for it. Crickets often create a pulsing, familiar tone, like a gentle metronome. Katydids can add a sharper, rhythmic pattern, sometimes sounding like soft tapping or quiet mechanical ticking. When many insects call at once, the sound becomes a continuous layer, like a blanket over the swamp. And blankets are useful tonight. A steady insect chorus can give your mind something to rest against. It fills the silence just enough so your thoughts don't rush in to occupy it. It provides predictability, and predictability can be soothing. Your nervous system hears repetition and relaxes the way it relaxes to waves, to rain, to a fan in the corner of a room. Insects are also a reminder of scale. The swamp is enormous, yes, but it is held together by tiny lives. Small bodies doing small tasks, many small tasks adding up to the feeling of a living, breathing place. If you've ever felt like your own small efforts don't matter, the swamp offers a gentle alternative view. Small things build big worlds. Tonight, though, you don't have to build anything. You can simply listen. Some people like to imagine insects as the swamp's night staff, quietly on duty, keeping the atmosphere consistent. If you find that image comforting, you can picture them wearing tiny, invisible uniforms, taking their jobs seriously, then clocking out when dawn arrives. No drama, just routine. There's also something soothing in the fact that these sounds are not personalized. They aren't directed at you. They don't require a response. They simply exist, and that can be a relief. If your mind keeps generating questions, let the insects answer with rhythm rather than words. If your mind asks, "What about tomorrow?" the insects respond, "Chirp, chirp, chirp." If your mind asks, "Did I do enough today?" the insects respond, "Steady, steady, steady." Their message is not complicated. It is, the night is here. The night continues. You can rest inside it. As the insect clockwork hums along, we begin to notice another layer beneath the water's surface, something quiet moving under reflections, fish turning slowly in dark channels, living in the shadowed half of the swamp story. We drift down to them next, soft and unhurried. The surface of the swamp can look like a mirror. Moonlight rests on it. Shadows slide across it. Mist hovers above it like a second, softer surface. And beneath all that reflection, another world continues quietly. Fish move through the Atchafalaya's channels and backwaters in a calm, submerged rhythm. You don't always see them clearly at night. Often you notice them as suggestions. A faint ripple that begins from nowhere, a small circle widening outward, a shadow shifting under the sheen. It can be comforting to remember that life continues even when you cannot see it fully. The swamp is layered, and the lower layers are not chaotic. They are simply hidden, moving gently in the dark. Fish in swamp waters often navigate through vegetation, around roots, beneath floating mats of plants. The environment is complex, but the movement can look smooth, like a slow glide. Water supports their bodies, and they let that support do much of the work. They turn with subtle flicks. They pause. They drift. There is a good sleep lesson there. Allow support. Let your bed support you. Let gravity do what it does. Let the day fall away without you holding it. The Atchafalaya's waters are often rich with sediment, which can make visibility low. The water has a darker, tea-like quality. And yet, fish live comfortably within it. They do not require perfect clarity to be at home. They simply adapt their senses to what the swamp offers: touch, vibration, subtle changes in current. That can also be a kind thought for your own mind. You don't need perfect clarity tonight. You don't need every question answered. You can rest, even if some things remain murky. Sleep does not demand a fully solved day. Sometimes when fish move near the surface, they create a gentle disturbance, small ripples that catch moonlight and break it into moving shards of silver. It's one of the swamp's quietest spectacles. Light turning into motion, motion turning back into stillness. And if you want a soft humor here, you can imagine fish as the swamp's quiet librarians, gliding through the stacks beneath the surface, keeping the place organized, never speaking above a whisper. They shush the water simply by being calm. Tonight, let the fish remain beneath the reflection. Let the surface stay smooth. Let your mind become like that surface, reflective, quiet, untroubled. Because above and below, the Atchafalaya is always doing the same gentle thing. It is continuing, and the way it continues, slowly, patiently, brings us to another quiet force shaping this landscape over long time. The sediment, the silt, the soft building material of the swamp. The Atchafalaya is not only a swamp you can see, it is a swamp being made. Not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily, grain by grain. The water carries sediment, tiny particles of soil, bits of organic matter, soft mineral dust. When currents slow in certain places, the sediment settles. It sinks gently. It rests on the bottom. Over time, those tiny rests become something larger. New ground, new banks, new shallow areas where plants can take hold. In other words, the swamp is a slow builder. There is something deeply calming about that idea, that landscapes can be constructed through softness, no sudden force needed. Just steady movement, steady settling, steady patience. If you picture a single grain of silt falling through dark water, it is almost too slow to notice. And yet, over years, over centuries, those grains shape the basin. They fill in spaces. They create edges. They help the swamp's mosaic keep changing form. Sometimes the water looks brownish or tea-colored because of all this suspended material. To some eyes, that might seem messy, but in a wetland, it is richness, it is fertility, it is the ingredient that helps plants grow, which helps insects thrive, which supports birds and fish and everything else. The Atchafalaya becomes a reminder that mud can be a complement. Mud is soil plus water, and together they become possibility. If you've ever felt like you are in a muddy part of life, unclear, slow, not neatly defined, you might take comfort from the swamp's perspective. Mud is not a failure. Mud is a beginning. Mud holds nutrients. Mud is where roots learn to grip. Mud is where new land starts quietly forming. Tonight, you don't need to be crisp and polished. You can be soft. You can be slow. You can be a little unformed. Sleep is a muddy process in the best way. The mind loosens its shape, thoughts blend, edges blur, and something restorative builds underneath. And just as silt settles when currents slow, your thoughts can settle when you slow your attention. You don't need to force them down. You simply let the motion decrease. Let the mind become calm water, and the thoughts will drift downward on their own. In the Atchafalaya, this settling is continuous, a quiet cycle that never needs a spotlight. The swamp is always becoming, always reshaping, always doing it gently. And where sediment collects, other things collect too. Fallen branches, driftwood, and the soft structures that turn leftovers into shelter. We drift to those next, noticing how the swamp turns simple materials into comfort. In the Atchafalaya, you will see wood in many stages of its life. Standing trees, fallen trees, broken branches, smooth pieces of driftwood that look like they've been quietly polished by water and time. Nothing here feels wasted. The swamp has a way of making use of what arrives. A fallen branch may rest partly submerged, becoming a simple bridge between air and water. A log may float near a bank, turning into a slow-moving platform for resting turtles. A tangle of wood beneath the surface can create structure, places where small fish linger, where shadows feel safe, where the underwater world has rooms and corners. From a distance, driftwood can look like scattered debris. Up close, it feels like furniture. Nature's furniture is never shiny or perfectly symmetrical. It's comfortable in a different way. It fits the place. It belongs, and it does not demand attention. Driftwood also carries a sense of time. Wood that has traveled through water has been shaped by repeated contact, soft pressure, small currents, gentle rubbing. It becomes smoother, quieter, less sharp. If you run your hand along it in your imagination, it feels like a lesson. The world can soften us without breaking us. If your day has left you feeling rough around the edges, you can borrow that thought. Sleep is part of how you get polished. Rest is part of how your sharp corners become gentler. There's a small, playful image here too. Imagine driftwood as the swamp's way of redecorating. A branch floats in, and the swamp says calmly, "Yes, that will do nicely over there." A log drifts by, and the swamp says, "Perfect, another seat." The Atchafalaya rearranges its living room slowly, with no need to announce the changes. And as the wood settles into new places, it contributes to the swamp's soundscape as well. Water lapping softly against bark, tiny creaks that are more like settling noises than anything else. A quiet knock as a floating stick taps a root, then drifts away. All of it feels domestic in a wild way. This is one of the Atchafalaya's more comforting truths. Even in a vast landscape, there are small pockets of shelter. There are places to rest, logs, roots, shallow edges. The swamp does not feel empty. It feels furnished. Tonight, let your own rest feel furnished too. Let your pillow be a soft log. Let your blankets be moss. Let your room be a quiet cypress grove. And as we drift onward, we begin to notice the green world that thrives with wet feet. Plants that seem perfectly content to live at the boundary between water and land, turning edges into softness. Not every plant enjoys living with water at its ankles, but in the Atchafalaya, many plants seem perfectly content with damp living. They grow along shorelines, on floating mats, in shallow channels, and around roots that never quite dry. The swamp, in a way, is an invitation to greenery. Come close, drink deeply, soften the edges. You can imagine the plant life here as the swamp's gentle upholstery. Leaves and stems cushion the scene. They soften hard lines. They turn open water into a textured surface, a place where reflections break into patterns and ripples become smaller, quieter. Along the margins, grasses and reeds create a delicate border. They sway with even the smallest breeze, adding movement that never feels hurried. On the water, floating plants gather in loose clusters, drifting slowly like sleepy rafts. In shallow places, vegetation becomes a living curtain, partially concealing what lies beneath and making the whole landscape feel more intimate. Plants also do quiet work. They stabilize sediment. They provide shade. They offer hiding places and resting places for small creatures. They filter water in subtle ways. The swamp's plant life is part of the system's calm cooperation, many small contributions that make the whole place feel balanced. If you've ever needed a reminder that you don't have to do big things to be valuable, the swamp plants offer it. They don't perform. They simply exist in the right place, doing the right small work, day after day, night after night. And there's something soothing in how plants accept their conditions. A plant doesn't argue with humidity. It doesn't resist the season. It leans into what is available: light, moisture, warmth. It adjusts without making a fuss. Tonight, you can do something similar. Lean into what is available: a soft bed, a quiet room, the sound of a calm story, the simple act of breathing. If your mind starts reaching for control, plants offer a gentler approach. Adapt, rest, grow slowly. Let the night be the night. Some of these plants will appear again as we move deeper into the Atchafalaya's subtle wonders, because in a swamp, plants are not just background. They are architecture. They are texture. They are calm. And next, we'll drift toward one of the swamp's most soothing curiosities. Little green rafts that move across the surface, as if the water is carrying tiny gardens to new places, slowly and quietly, without any need to explain why. There are moments in the Atchafalaya when the water looks as if it is carrying its own little neighborhoods. Not boats, though it can feel a little like that. These are floating mats of vegetation, gentle rafts of green that gather and drift as the currents make room for them. From a distance, they can look like soft islands. Up close, they feel like tiny worlds, leaves layered over stems, roots dangling into dark water, and small pockets of stillness tucked between. Some floating plants live this way by design, thriving on the water surface. Others gather after high water and slow shifts in the swamp's edges, collecting into loose, comfortable clusters. The Atchafalaya doesn't seem to mind either way. It simply lets them float, like the basin is calmly rearranging the furniture again. What's soothing is how unbothered these green rafts appear. They do not fight the water, they ride it. They move without effort, traveling at the speed of the swamp's breathing. If you watch long enough, you'll notice that they rarely go in straight lines. They drift a little, turn a little, pause in a calm corner, then continue, like a daydream that isn't trying to arrive anywhere. And these floating gardens often carry life. Tiny insects rest on leaves. Small frogs may use the raft as a temporary platform, a little stage with no audience. Fish linger underneath, enjoying the shade and the sense of cover. Even the water beneath a floating mat can feel different. Cooler, quieter, dimmed, like a room with the curtains drawn. It's easy in the calm of night to imagine the swamp speaking softly through these rafts, saying, "You don't have to be anchored all the time. You can float a little. You can be carried." If your day has asked you to be firm and fixed, decisive, structured, constantly on, the floating gardens offer the opposite. They show how something can still be whole while drifting, how a living thing can remain itself while being moved gently by forces larger than it. There's a mild humor in it too, if you want it, the swamp's version of a slow parade. No marching, no music, just a quiet procession of greenery drifting by like it has important, very sleepy appointments. Tonight, you can join that mood. Let your mind become a small raft, still intact, still safe, but no longer clinging to the shore of busy thinking. Let the current do the carrying. Let your thoughts travel lightly, and if they circle back, that's fine. In the Atchafalaya, circling is not a mistake. It's part of the drift. And as these floating gardens glide onward, we begin to notice the deeper relationship beneath them, the slow, steady conversation between roots and water, the kind of partnership that keeps the whole swamp quietly alive. In the Atchafalaya, the most important conversations often happen without sound. Beneath the surface, roots press into mud, weave around submerged wood, and grip the soft ground with calm determination. Above, water moves around them, sometimes high, sometimes lower, sometimes flowing, sometimes nearly still. And between roots and water, an agreement seems to form. You hold, I will pass. You drink, I will bring. You anchor, I will reshape. It is a quiet partnership, and it makes the swamp feel steady even when it is always changing. Tree roots in wetlands live in a world with less oxygen in the soil than dry forests. The ground is saturated, dense, heavy with water. And yet the cypress and tupelo do not seem bothered. They are adapted to this watery life. They stand with wide bases, and their roots spread into the soft earth like slow hands holding a gentle bowl. If you imagine that underground network, it can feel like the swamp's hidden structure, an unseen architecture supporting everything above. Roots hold sediment in place. They reduce erosion. They create little pockets and channels, shaping the water's movement in small ways. The swamp is not only built by water, it is also held by roots. And water, in return, offers a kind of constant attention. It keeps the soil moist. It carries nutrients in subtle flows. It moves tiny particles that become new ground. It supports organisms that live in the root zone, small creatures that rely on the shaded complexity beneath the surface. There's a gentle lesson here for a tired mind. Stability and change can coexist. A root stays, water moves, both are necessary. One provides grounding, the other provides renewal. Tonight, you can choose which you need. If you feel scattered, be the root. Let your body be heavy and supported. Let your attention sink into the simple fact of being here. Feel the bed beneath you, the floor beneath the bed, the earth beneath the floor. Layer upon layer of support, steady and quiet. If you feel stuck, be the water. Let your thoughts move without resistance. Let them pass through, like a current sliding between trunks, never needing to explain where it's going. Let the day loosen its grip, and there's something comforting in realizing that neither role is better. The swamp does not choose one over the other. It allows both. Roots do not chase water. Water does not try to dislodge roots. They cooperate by being exactly what they are. Sometimes the surface of the swamp looks smooth, and you can forget about the busy, tangled world below it. But the swamp remembers, in its own way, that the hidden work matters. Quiet things support everything. If you need permission to do quieter work tonight, resting, breathing, letting your mind soften, take it from the roots. They do not perform, they simply hold. And as this silent conversation continues beneath us, we begin to widen our view again toward the shape of the waterways themselves, how channels shift, how bends persist, and how the swamp seems to remember through the paths water prefers to take. If the Atchafalaya remembers, it may remember in curves. A bayou rarely runs straight for long. It bends, it leans, it wanders around what is firm, and it lingers where the land is willing. Over time, water finds routes that feel natural, and those routes become familiar, not just to us, but to the landscape itself. In daylight, you might see a channel as a simple ribbon of water. At night, it becomes something more like a pathway of reflected sky. Moonlight stretches across it. Mist softens its edges. Trees lean in as if listening. The channel looks less like a boundary and more like a thought, slowly moving through the swamp. And the shape of a waterway is a kind of story. Where the current is slightly stronger, the channel may deepen. Where the flow slows, sediment may settle and make the edges broader. Small shifts accumulate until the bayou becomes a gentle record of repeated motion. It is not memory as a snapshot. It is memory as a pattern, like a song remembered because it has been sung many times. Sometimes, old channels remain even after the main flow has changed. A quiet backwater, a still bend that no longer carries much current. These places can feel like the swamp's softer pages, chapters that remain even when the story has moved on. They become calm pockets where reflections stay longer, where fish drift under the surface, where plant mats gather as if they found a comfortable waiting room. If you imagine the swamp from above, just for a moment, you might picture it like a braided fabric, water lines weaving in and out, reconnecting, splitting, rejoining. The Atchafalaya is not a single thread. It is a whole weave, and that weave can shift without falling apart. Tonight, that idea can be comforting. Your mind may feel braided too. Memories, plans, small worries, small joys, all weaving together. You do not need to pull the threads apart. You can let them rest as they are, and allow the larger pattern to hold. If a thought returns again and again, you can treat it like a familiar bend in a bayou. "Ah," you might say gently, "there you are again." Not with annoyance, just recognition. The swamp does not scold water for returning to a curve. It simply lets it happen. And in the Atchafalaya, even change is slow enough to feel safe. The landscape adjusts over seasons and years. Water explores new edges, sediment builds new ground, trees root into slightly different shapes of shore. Nothing needs to break for something to shift. If you need a soft practice tonight, imagine your breath as a waterway. Inhale, the current moves in. Exhale, the current moves out. No sharp turns, no forcing, just gentle repetition. Your breath becomes a channel your body already knows, familiar, dependable, quietly remembered. And as we drift along this imagined water path, we begin to notice how everything in the swamp is connected by these channels, how life shares, supports, and breathes together, as if the entire ecosystem is one slow, cooperative body. The Atchafalaya can feel enormous, but it doesn't feel lonely. That's because it is full of relationships, not dramatic ones, not complicated ones, just steady, practical connections that make the whole system feel as if it is breathing together. Water supports plants, plants shelter insects, insects become food for birds, leaves fall and feed tiny organisms. Tiny organisms enrich the soil. The soil supports roots. Roots shape water, and around the loop continues, quietly, gently, faithfully. In a place like this, no creature is truly separate from the rest of the scene. Even the smallest life participates. A single insect may seem insignificant on its own, but multiply it by 1,000,000 quiet evenings, and you begin to feel how the swamp stays alive. At night, these connections become softer to observe. You may not see every interaction. You may not need to. You can sense the cooperation as a mood, a feeling of balance, of mutual belonging. The swamp is a master of subtle teamwork. Floating vegetation creates shade, and fish enjoy cooler water beneath it. Trees hold the shoreline, and the water's edges remain gentle instead of raw. Frogs sing, and their chorus becomes part of the night's rhythm, which can influence how other creatures time their own activities. Even the air, humid, warm, supports the life that depends on moisture. It can be soothing to remember that nature does not require perfection to function. It requires participation. It requires many small contributions, repeated over time. The ecosystem thrives, not because each part is flawless, but because each part simply does its quiet role. Tonight, you might let that idea take some weight off your shoulders. You do not have to do everything. You do not have to hold the whole world. You can be one small part of your own life and still be enough. Rest is a contribution too. Sleep supports tomorrow the way water supports roots, silently, steadily, without applause. And there is gentle comfort in how the swamp doesn't judge. It doesn't rank. It doesn't label one creature important and another extra. It allows. If you want a small humor here, imagine the ecosystem as a very polite neighborhood where everyone has a quiet job. The trees provide shade. The frogs handle music. The insects manage the background ambience. The water does transportation. Nobody boasts. Nobody over-explains. They just keep things comfortable. As you listen, let your breathing join that neighborhood rhythm. Let your inhale feel like the swamp drawing in coolness. Let your exhale feel like the swamp releasing warmth. Your body becomes part of the same idea, a system that works best when it is not forced. And as the Atchafalaya continues its calm cooperation, we move into a deeper kind of quiet, the kind that only night can teach. Not a threatening quiet, but a softening quiet, where edges blur and the mind is invited to slow down. In the Atchafalaya, night does not feel like an ending. It feels like a change in texture. Colors soften into deep blues and muted greens. Details become less demanding. The distance turns gentle, as if the swamp has decided to simplify the view for tired eyes. And in that simplification, night teaches a small lesson. You do not have to take in everything at once. During the day, the mind can be busy naming: tree, bird, leaf, water, task, message, plan. At night, naming becomes optional. The swamp becomes shape and sound and slow movement. A cypress trunk becomes a dark pillar. Spanish moss becomes a silvery curtain. Water becomes a soft mirror. The mind is allowed to loosen its grip on definition. This is one of night's kindest teachings. It reduces the need to interpret. You can simply experience. The Atchafalaya's night sounds also shift. The chorus remains, but it can feel more blended, less like separate instruments, more like one steady hush with gentle highlights. A frog call rises and fades. An owl voice travels through branches and then dissolves into distance. Water moves around roots with a quiet, private language. Night also encourages slower movement. Animals that are active now often move with care, not drama. And animals that rest now become part of the stillness, tucked into cover, quiet and safe. The entire swamp seems to agree that this is not the time for sharp edges. If your day has been full of sharp edges, bright screens, fast decisions, too many conversations, night offers a different environment for your nervous system. It says, you can soften now. You can dim your internal lights. You can let your thoughts become less crisp. One gentle practice is to imagine night as a friend rather than a condition. A soft presence that sits beside you and lowers its voice, inviting you to do the same. The Atchafalaya makes this easy because it already lives in night so well. It doesn't resist darkness, it uses it. It becomes calm inside it. And if you want a little quiet humor, you can picture the swamp at night as a place that has put up an invisible sign. Please keep your worries at a reasonable volume. Not because worries are forbidden, just because this is a sleepy place and everything here prefers gentle tones. Tonight, let night teach you in the simplest way, by changing what feels necessary. You don't need to analyze. You don't need to plan. You can be present, and presence can be restful. As we let the darkness soften the scene, we begin to appreciate another lesson the swamp offers: how living things fit their environment with grace, not by forcing the world to change, but by adapting in quiet, poetic ways. In the Atchafalaya, adaptation looks less like effort and more like belonging. Plants that thrive with wet feet, trees with broad bases and roots that understand saturated soil, animals whose senses match the dark water and humid air. The swamp does not demand that life become something else. It invites life to become comfortable here, and over time, comfort becomes skill. Adaptation in nature can sound like a serious word, but in a calm landscape like this, it feels gentle, like adjusting a pillow or choosing the warm side of a blanket. Living things respond to what the swamp offers: water, shade, mud, insects, quiet cover. They do not negotiate loudly, they simply fit. A turtle uses a log as a resting place, and the log becomes part of the turtle's world. A heron stands in shallows where its long legs make sense, and the water becomes part of the heron's stillness. Frogs sing where sound carries best, and the swamp becomes an amplifier for their small voices. Even the trees participate in this poetry. Their shapes reflect the conditions: sturdy in flood, patient in humidity, steady in soft ground. Spanish moss hangs where air is moist, turning the forest into a quieter room. When you look at it this way, adaptation becomes a kind of calm intelligence. Not the intelligence of solving problems quickly, but the intelligence of meeting reality gently and saying, "This is what we have. This is how we live well inside it." Tonight, you can borrow that approach for yourself. If you are tired, meet tiredness with softness, not argument. If your mind is busy, meet busyness with a slower rhythm, not a fight. If you feel unsettled, meet that feeling with something steady: your breath, your bed, the quiet continuation of this story. The swamp offers permission to adjust without shame. There's also comfort in remembering that adaptation is often quiet. It happens over time. It happens in small choices. The Atchafalaya is built on small adjustments: water choosing a curve, sediment settling, plants gathering, animals finding the right edge of shade. And if you want a small smile, you can imagine the swamp as a place where everyone is quietly good at working with what's there. No complaints, no big speeches, just gentle practicality. The frog choir doesn't demand better acoustics. It uses the night air. The fireflies don't ask for brighter bulbs. They bring their own. As you listen, you can practice a simple adaptation. Let your attention become less intense. Let your eyes grow heavier. Let your body accept the support beneath it. You do not have to force sleep. You can adapt to the night by becoming more like it: dim, slow, comfortable. And as we continue, we widen our view to another kind of gentle change: the seasons, which arrive in the Atchafalaya like soft footsteps, never urgent, always gradual, always part of the swamp's calm rhythm. In the Atchafalaya, seasons change the swamp the way a lamp changes a room: slowly, subtly, almost without announcement. Water levels rise and lower across the year. Some months bring more flooding, turning forests into wider, watery halls. Other times allow a bit more shoreline to appear, giving roots and mud a chance to breathe in the open air. The difference is not dramatic in a single day. It's more like noticing, one evening, that the air feels slightly cooler, or that the chorus sounds a little different. Plants respond in their quiet way. Leaves shift in tone. New growth appears when the light and warmth feel right. Floating vegetation gathers and disperses. The swamp's green palette is always changing, but it rarely feels restless. It feels like the same song played in different keys. Animals also move with the seasons, not in frantic journeys tonight, but in gentle adjustments. Some birds visit at certain times, adding new silhouettes to the branches. Some creatures become more noticeable as temperatures shift, and some simply keep living their steady lives, letting the season pass over them like wind over water. A season in the Atchafalaya is not a hard line. It is a gradual leaning, a slow turn of the page. That's what makes it so restful to imagine. It reminds you that change does not always require a sharp moment. Not everything transforms with a bang. Many things soften into their next form. If you are in a season of change yourself, new plans, new responsibilities, new feelings, the swamp offers a gentle model. Let it happen gradually. Let it be a slow turning rather than a sudden push. Tonight, you can also let your own season be simple. It is the season of rest, the season of night, the season of letting your body do its quiet repair work while your mind floats. There's something soothing about thinking of sleep as a season that arrives each evening. Not a punishment for being tired, but a natural shift, like dusk, like fog, like the way the swamp grows calmer as light fades. If you want a small practice, imagine your room as the Atchafalaya in late evening. The temperature's comfortable, the colors are dim, the soundscape is steady. Your body is one of the creatures settling into its nighttime rhythm. Nothing needs to be forced. The season does the work, and if a thought tries to hurry you, sleep now, relax faster. Tomorrow is coming. You can respond with the swamp's seasonal wisdom. Things arrive when they arrive. You can let the night unfold. As seasons teach patience, the swamp teaches another quiet skill that becomes more and more valuable as darkness deepens: stillness. Not as emptiness, but as a gentle strategy for comfort. In the Atchafalaya, stillness is not a pause between important moments. Stillness is one of the important moments. You see it everywhere: a heron standing like a statue, a turtle resting on a log, an alligator floating as if it has decided to become part of the water, even plants holding their leaves in the air without fuss. The swamp is full of life, and much of that life is unhurried. This is not laziness, it is efficiency. In a wetland, energy matters. Moving constantly would be expensive. So many creatures conserve energy by resting, by waiting, by being quiet when quiet is enough. Stillness becomes a skill, one the swamp seems to reward with comfort. But tonight, we don't treat stillness like a tactical idea. We treat it like an invitation, a permission slip written by nature itself. You are allowed to be still. Stillness can also be a kind of listening. When a creature is still, it notices subtle shifts, ripples, vibrations, soft sounds. The swamp's world is full of quiet information, and stillness is how you receive it without strain. For a tired mind, that translates beautifully. Stillness lets you notice what you actually need. Maybe you need sleep. Maybe you need softness. Maybe you need your thoughts to stop performing. If you've been on all day, talking, planning, deciding, stillness can feel unfamiliar at first. The mind may try to fill it with noise. That is normal. The swamp would not scold you. It would simply continue being calm until your internal tempo begins to match. A gentle exercise. Choose one small part of your body to relax more deeply. Your shoulders, your forehead, your hands. Let that area become still. Then let the stillness spread, like calm water widening after a tiny ripple fades. There can be quiet humor here too. You might imagine the swamp as a place that respects professional resting. The turtles are experts, the herons are artists, the alligators are long-term consultants. Nobody questions it. Nobody says, "Shouldn't you be doing something?" The swamp understands. Being still is doing something. It is returning to balance. Tonight, you can be a student of that kind of wisdom. Let your breathing be the only movement that matters. Inhale softly. Exhale slowly. Everything else can be still. Even your thoughts can become still, one by one, like leaves settling on water. And as we settle into this idea, we arrive at another gentle truth the Atchafalaya offers. Home is not always a fixed location. Sometimes, home is a pattern of sounds, of smells, of rhythms you recognize without thinking. In the Atchafalaya, home doesn't always look like a single spot. For many swamp creatures, home is the feel of shallow water, the presence of cover, the right temperature, the familiar chorus at night. It's a set of conditions, a pattern, a rhythm that says, "This is where you belong." A turtle may return to a log that warms in the right way. A heron may favor a particular bend where the water is calm. A frog may call from the same patch of reeds where sound carries nicely. Even plants gather where light and water meet in the right balance, making the shoreline feel like a gentle, repeating design. Home, here, is less about walls and more about comfort. That can be a restful idea to hold in your own life, because sometimes the mind searches for home in big answers, future plans, perfect stability, certainty. The swamp offers something simpler. Home can be a set of small, repeatable feelings. A soft bed, a familiar blanket, a quiet story, a steady rhythm of breathing, the low light of evening, the sense that you don't have to perform for anyone right now. Tonight, you can let those patterns become your home. If you're listening with your eyes closed, notice what your body recognizes. It recognizes the weight of your head on a pillow. It recognizes the gentle warmth under a blanket. It recognizes the calm pace of this narration. These are patterns too, signals that tell your nervous system, you are safe, you can rest. The Atchafalaya also shows how home can be flexible. Water levels change, channels shift, and yet the swamp remains home because the pattern continues. Water, trees, sound, shelter, night. The overall rhythm stays recognizable even when the details rearrange. If you've been experiencing changes in your own life, new routines, new responsibilities, you might find comfort in that. You can still be at home in yourself even when circumstances shift, as long as you keep a few gentle patterns intact. Rest, breath, softness, patience. And if you want a small smile, you can imagine the swamp's idea of home decor. A log here, a patch of reeds there, a curtain of moss overhead, and a frog choir included at no extra charge. Cozy, practical, and always open. Tonight, let your own space be enough. Let your mind stop searching for a perfect place to land. You have one already. This moment, this breath, this gentle drift. And as we settle into that sense of belonging, the swamp offers one more lesson, perhaps its most soothing: letting go. Because water holds nothing tightly. It carries, releases, and continues, teaching softness through motion. Water in the Atchafalaya has a quiet talent. It releases. A leaf falls and the water carries it for a while. Then the leaf drifts to an edge and rests. A small stick floats along, taps a root, turns gently, then continues. Sediment travels suspended in the current until it settles, becoming part of the bottom. Nothing is gripped too tightly for too long. The swamp moves things through, and that movement feels kind. Letting go here is not dramatic. It is ordinary. It is constant. And that constancy can be deeply reassuring for a tired mind, because the mind often tries to hold. It holds conversations. It holds mistakes. It holds worries about tomorrow. It holds the day like a bundle it refuses to set down. But in the Atchafalaya, the current would simply say, you can put that down now. You can let it move on. If you imagine a small bayou channel at night, you can picture the surface carrying reflections, moonlight broken into soft patterns. Even the reflections are not held in one place. They glide, they reform, they fade and return. The world stays beautiful without needing to be fixed. That's an important kind of beauty, the beauty of things that don't cling. Tonight, try a simple practice. Choose one thought you've been holding, not the biggest one, just a small one. Imagine placing it on a floating leaf. Watch the leaf drift away on dark water. You don't need to chase it. You don't need to wave goodbye. You simply let it go, the way water does. If another thought appears, you can do the same. Another leaf, another gentle drift. The swamp has plenty of room. Letting go also shows up in the swamp's cycles. Water rises and lowers. Plants grow and fade back. Soundscapes shift as the night deepens. Nothing stays exactly the same, and yet the swamp remains itself. It does not panic about change. It flows through it. There's a quiet humor in how calm water can be about everything. It never makes speeches. It never insists on closure. It just carries on, literally. If you could interview the current, it might respond to every question with the same peaceful answer. I'm moving. And perhaps that's enough for tonight. You don't have to resolve the day. You don't have to finish every thought. You can let the current handle what can be carried, and let the rest settle on its own time. As you breathe, let your exhale be a small release. Let your body soften deeper into the support beneath you. Let your mind follow the swamp's example. Carry less, resist less, rest more. And with that gentle motion of letting go, we are ready to rise into the next phase of the journey, where the reflections deepen, the wonder widens, and the Atchafalaya continues to teach softness through the quiet intelligence of the natural world. We began with a question that arrived like mist. What does a landscape remember? Now, after drifting through water and trees, through soundscapes and soft lights, the question returns, not louder, not more urgent, just closer. Like a familiar bend in a bayou that you recognize by feel rather than by sight. In the Atchafalaya, memory does not seem to live in a single object. It lives in repetition, in the way the water rises and lowers in gentle cycles, in the way frogs offer their steady chorus night after night, as if the swamp has a heartbeat and the frogs are simply keeping time with it. In the way Spanish moss sways with any passing breath of air, repeating the same slow gesture like a lullaby with one perfect line. Maybe that is what a landscape remembers, its own rhythms. And perhaps, tonight, your body remembers rhythms too. It remembers how to settle, when the light fades. It remembers how to soften its muscles when you allow it. It remembers how to breathe without effort. The world teaches these rhythms again and again, and your body has been learning them all your life. If your mind has been holding on to fast patterns, busy thinking, quick checking, constant planning, you can let those patterns loosen. You can let the Atchafalaya offer a slower pattern to follow, one that says, pause is allowed, silence is friendly, stillness is useful. Imagine the swamp remembering by simply continuing, not clinging to yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow. Continuing is a kind of memory in motion. The water keeps moving through familiar channels. Trees keep standing. Night keeps arriving. Morning eventually returns. The cycle itself is the record. If you find comfort in gentle imagery, picture the Atchafalaya at this hour, cypress trunks rising like quiet columns, water smoothing out into dark glass, mist drifting low and unbothered, a few fireflies blinking as if they are practicing closing their eyes. Everything is ongoing, but nothing is rushing, and your breathing can become part of that ongoing calm. Inhale, as if the swamp is drawing in cool air. Exhale, as if the swamp is releasing warmth back into the night. Your body joins the system, the same way a small frog joins the choir, simply by doing what it naturally does. So we return to the question without pressure. What does a landscape remember? Perhaps it remembers what it can hold gently. The shape of water, the patience of trees, the calm of night routines, the steady kindness of repeating cycles. And as you hold that thought, softly, lightly, there's no need to keep it perfectly formed. You can let the question float beside you again, like a leaf on dark water, drifting toward a quieter part of the night. If the Atchafalaya offers an answer, it does so the way it offers everything else, indirectly, quietly, and with plenty of room for you to interpret. The answer may live in shape, a bayou curve that persists year after year, a line of trees that marks a slightly higher ridge, the way cypress knees rise in clusters, repeating the same soft forms, the way Spanish moss drapes the same branches, as if the forest has decided on a consistent style of comfort. Shape is memory made visible, and at night, those shapes become simpler. The details melt into shadow and tone. What remains is the outline, tree against sky, moss against air, water against root. The swamp becomes a study in silhouettes, and silhouettes can feel more restful than sharp detail. Imagine standing quietly in a flooded cypress grove. The water is dark, but calm. The trunks rise straight and steady, their bases widened like they are grounded in something deeper than mud. Above, the canopy is a soft ceiling, broken by occasional gaps where a faint star might peek through. In that scene, you can sense the swamp's long continuity. It doesn't need to speak about its age. It simply feels old in a peaceful way, mature, unbothered, settled into itself. And in that maturity, there is comfort, because something old and calm does not react quickly. It absorbs, it accommodates, it holds. Maybe that is another answer. The landscape remembers how to hold what passes through it. Water comes and goes. The swamp holds the pattern. Seasons shift. The swamp holds the shape. Creatures move through their routines. The swamp holds their habitat. It is a kind of steady container for change. You can apply that idea inwardly tonight. Your mind has been a container all day. It held conversations, decisions, small stresses, small joys. Now it can shift into a different job, holding rest, not holding problems, holding calm. If a thought arrives, an unfinished task, a message you forgot to answer, you can let it be just another shape passing through. You don't have to pick it up. You can let your mind be like the cypress shade, steady, dark, spacious, a quiet place where things can appear and fade without leaving sharp marks. And if you'd like a small, gentle humor, you can imagine the swamp as a very experienced host. It doesn't fuss over guests. It simply makes the room comfortable. Here is water. Here is shade. Here is a soft chorus. Make yourself at home. The Atchafalaya does not overcomplicate hospitality. It just provides the essentials. Tonight, let that be enough for you too. Shade, breath, stillness, a soft story. And as we remain under the cypress canopy, the night begins to deepen further. The chorus shifts, the movement slows. Creatures start to settle into their quiet nighttime positions, as if the whole basin is dimming itself towards sleep. There is a moment in the night when the Atchafalaya seems to lower its voice even more. Not because life stops, life continues, but because the rhythm changes. The swamp becomes less like a conversation and more like a hum, a steady, low, ongoing presence that does not demand attention. Some birds become quieter, tucked into branches. Some insects keep calling, but their chorus can feel smoother, less punctuated. Frogs may continue their steady notes, but even that can soften, as if the choir has shifted into a gentler verse. In the shallows, the pale birds, the egrets and herons, may become more like shadowy statues, resting with their bodies still and their attention unforced. Turtles settle into calmer spots. Fish continue beneath the surface, quiet and unseen. Even the air seems to hold its moisture in a calmer way, mist lingering rather than moving. This is the Atchafalaya's version of bedtime routines. No teeth to brush, of course. No alarms to set. Just simple repositioning, quieter breathing, gentler movement. The swamp knows how to transition. It doesn't snap from day to night. It eases into it. If you are still awake, you can let yourself ease too. You don't have to make sleep happen by force. You can simply move toward it the way a creature moves toward shelter. Slowly, naturally, with confidence that rest is a normal part of living. Notice your body. Your eyelids may feel heavier. Your hands may feel warmer. Your breathing may have already slowed without you asking it to. These are signs that your system is beginning its own quiet settling, like a marsh grass bending into stillness after a breeze. If your mind is still offering thoughts, you can treat them like distant calls across the swamp, present, but not close. A thought can be a sound in the background. It doesn't have to be a task in the foreground. Sometimes, it helps to imagine the world outside your room settling too. Even if you live in a busy place, you can picture the Atchafalaya's night routine overlaying your surroundings like a calm filter. Dim the lights, soften the edges, lower the volume. And if you'd like a small, gentle joke, imagine the swamp's residents quietly reminding each other to keep it down. "Somebody's trying to sleep over here," says the moss, swaying with exaggerated politeness. The frogs respond by continuing to sing, but you can imagine they do it in their most lullaby-like tone. In truth, the swamp is simply doing what it does, letting night be night. And as that continues, we begin the final descent, returning toward stillness, toward a simple conclusion, toward the softest version of the question we started with. The water smooths, the air quiets. The Atchafalaya becomes less a place you picture and more a calm feeling you carry into sleep. Now the Atchafalaya feels almost like one long, unbroken exhale. Water that earlier showed ripples begins to smooth into darker glass. Mist stays low, a quiet veil. The trees remain steady, their silhouettes softened by distance and humidity. The soundscape continues, but it feels less like distinct voices and more like a single, blended hush. This is the swamp closing the day the way it closes every day, without ceremony. And you can close your own day the same way. Not with a grand summary, not with a list of what went right or wrong, simply by letting it end, letting it be complete because it is finished, not because it is perfect. If you recall the question, what does a landscape remember? You might notice that you no longer need a firm answer. The question itself has become restful. It has guided you into noticing patterns and softness, and now it can fade into the background like a distant frog call. The Atchafalaya, in its quiet way, seems to remember that endings do not have to be sharp. Dusk does not slam into night. It melts. Evening does not argue with darkness. It yields. And yielding to night is not giving up. It is relaxing. So let your body yield. Let your shoulders sink. Let your tongue rest in your mouth. Let your forehead smooth. Let your breath become easy, as if it is happening in a room made of moss and mist. If your thoughts still rise, you can allow them to rise and then settle, like silt in slow water, like a leaf finding the edge of a bayou and resting there. You don't need to push them away. You don't need to entertain them. You can simply let them drift toward quiet. Imagine for a moment that your mind is the Atchafalaya surface, dark, reflective, calm. A few ripples appear and fade. Moonlight stretches across it. Nothing needs to be controlled. The surface knows how to settle. And now, our story begins to dissolve into pure rest. The journey has brought you through the swamp's soft wonders, and you can keep any images you like. A heron's silhouette, moss swaying, fireflies blinking, water smoothing out under moonlight. From here, we move into the final chapters, where everything slows further, where the language becomes simpler, where you are guided gently into sleep the way the swamp guides night into stillness. When you're ready, we'll let the Atchafalaya become a quiet rhythm in the background of your dreams, steady, patient, and kind. The water holds the night like a mirror that has learned to be gentle. In the Atchafalaya, reflection is never perfectly crisp. It trembles slightly with the smallest movement. An insect touching the surface, a leaf drifting past, a quiet current sliding under floating plants. The moon appears in the water not as a sharp circle, but as a softened glow, stretched and reshaped by ripples that come and go like slow thoughts. This is a comforting kind of imperfection. It says, even if things aren't perfectly still, they can still be calm. The trees reflect too, dark pillars doubled beneath them, as if the swamp has built a second forest upside down. Spanish moss becomes a faint, trailing blur in the mirror. Fog makes everything even softer, like the world has been lightly brushed with sleep. If you imagine yourself floating on that calm surface, not in a dramatic way, just in a peaceful, supported way, you might feel how little effort is required. Water carries, night carries, the swamp carries, and you can let yourself be carried as well. Your breathing can be the only motion you pay attention to now. Inhale, a slow widening. Exhale, a slow smoothing. Each breath like a ripple that spreads and then disappears, leaving the surface quiet again. Nothing needs to be decided. Nothing needs to be fixed. The Atchafalaya is not asking you to understand it fully. It is simply offering you its steadiness, its slow reflections, its gentle repetition. And as the water holds the moonlight without clinging to it, you can hold this calm without clinging either. Let it be present. Let it pass through you. Let it settle into you. The world becomes a soft reflection, and you are allowed to become soft too. Now, imagine the Atchafalaya breathing. Not literally, of course, though sometimes the whole basin can feel alive enough to make you wonder. Imagine it as a rhythm, water moving slowly through channels, air drifting through reeds, mist rising and lowering, the night chorus pulsing like a slow heartbeat. In that rhythm, there is room for you to rest your mind. Let your breathing match the swamp's pace. Inhale gently, as if drawing in cool, damp air under cypress shade. Exhale slowly, as if releasing the day back into the water where it can float away. If you notice any tension, you don't need to fight it. You can soften around it, the way water softens around cypress knees, the way mist softens around tree trunks. The swamp does not battle obstacles, it flows with them. On each exhale, let something loosen. A shoulder, a hand, a muscle near your eyes, a thought that has been gripping too tightly. On each inhale, let something settle, a sense of safety, a sense of quiet, a simple permission to do nothing. The Atchafalaya's gift tonight is that it never rushes you. It does not say, sleep now. It simply keeps breathing. And the longer you stay with that gentle rhythm, the more your own system remembers how to drift. Breathing becomes simple again. Breathing becomes enough. And in that enoughness, sleep often arrives the way fog arrives, quietly, without announcement. Spanish moss sways like slow curtains in a room that has gone quiet. Mist stays low, curling along the water's surface, moving in soft shapes that don't need names. The cypress trunks stand steady, and their reflections hold for a moment, then blur, then return. Everything feels unhurried. If you still have images in your mind, let them be simple now. Moss, water, moonlight, a distant call, a soft ripple. You don't need a full scene. You don't need a story. You only need a few gentle textures, like fabric you can rest your attention on. The Atchafalaya continues, calm and patient, and you can continue too, into deeper relaxation. Your eyelids grow heavier. Your breathing remains steady. Your thoughts, if they appear, are quieter and slower, like leaves drifting without purpose. This is the drift. Not a drifting away from something, but a drifting toward rest. The swamp does not insist on a grand finale. It simply continues. Water keeps moving slowly through familiar curves. Night sounds pulse, soften, and blend. Trees hold their steady shapes. Mist lingers and thins. And somewhere, even if you can't hear it now, life keeps doing its quiet work. You can return to this calm whenever you need it. Not just tonight, but on any night when your mind feels loud. You can return with one simple image: moonlight on dark water, or one simple sound, a distant frog call, or one simple feeling, being carried. That is the gentle loop, returning without effort, finding home in a pattern. And now, you don't need to stay fully awake to listen. If sleep arrives, you can let it. The story is soft enough to fade into your dreams without needing your attention to hold it. The Atchafalaya remains what it has always been tonight, a place of slow water, patient trees, and quiet rhythms that never hurry. And as you rest, you can let that rhythm hold you, like a calm current, like a soft night breeze, like the steady continuation of the natural world. Everything flows through the wild. Sleep in that motion.